This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. This week on Antisocial Entertainment, we're joined once again by our perennial bomb thrower, Jacob Airey. He's as our resident comics guy. We wanted to talk about the Snyder-Cut, which just released today, and apparently you stayed up all night watching it.
Oh yeah, that was fun getting to work. 2 cups of coffee.
What was the was the logic in that? Just that was the only time you were going to be able to do it, or was there? Why did you stay up that late?
I wanted to. I guess I was worried about seeing spoilers. That was the main thing. Right? Only reviews had been come out, and it was from pre-releases and screeners. But so there's no real spoilers, but I was worried that if I got up and opened my phone, it would just be blowing up with spoilers from the film, and I was trying to avoid that.
Sure. I don't know I guess we should probably start real quick by talking about the theatrical cut of this, because that's kind of obviously the thing you have to talk about in light of this. I know you are not a Zack Snyder fan at all, but what did you think about when the theatrical cut from like 3.5 years ago?
When I first saw it, I actually kind of had it's mediocre, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. But then I watched it again maybe about a year later, and then I was like, I was totally wrong. This movie is garbage. And so I don't really know why. I think because seeing it in theaters was kind of a different experience. And also, I was probably blinded because I like Joss Whedon's work better than Zack Snyder's, and I'm aware of that bias. So I think probably when I first saw it, I was just thinking, it's not good, but it's just kind of like an atypical superhero flick. But then I saw it when I rented it on DVD. I was like, oh man, I was totally wrong. This movie is bad. And I actually went back and re-edited my old review because I was like, man, I was totally wrong. I look like an idiot. So, I think that what Whedon was trying to do was he was trying to bring in some of his signature humor, but because it's a Snyder film, Snyder films tend to be humorless. Not totally, but he tends to take a more grim turn. I think anyone would agree with that. So I think Whedon got orders from Warner Brothers, don't make this so grim. And so I think him, when Clark throws Batman at the battle, the statue on the ground, and he's like, oh yeah, definitely bleeding. And, this cheesy one-liner that you don't expect to hear from Batman. I think he was just trying to lighten the tone, and I think he failed. So I mean, that's what I think. I
mean, I will admit I have not watched the theatrical cut in 3.5 years. I saw it twice when it was in theaters, once by free will, and once by being dragged to see it a second time. And everything, I still vividly remember the structure and everything that happens in it, though. And it's all the things that just kind of pop in my head when I think about it. It's just this weird patchwork Frankenstein's monster of a film that just doesn't, not even just that it doesn't work. It's that it doesn't work as a sequel. It doesn't work as a standalone movie at all. It's the elements in it that Joss Whedon added clash with the original things, which ironically, those are something. When I think back to all my favorite scenes of the theatrical cut, they were the ones that were very explicitly Joss Whedon scenes. So I was a little surprised that that the best scenes in that movie weren't the ones Snyder came up with, which I guess kind of makes sense because Whedon is a good superhero writer, but I'm jumping around a lot because because both of these movies are very not necessarily confusing, but there's a lot to kind of discuss with both of them. But I mean, the most interesting thing to me about them is just comparing two very different filmmakers' like vision for this one story. Because at the end of the day, both the stories are basically the exact same movie. Just
Yeah, and that's what it's kind of funny because people were saying early on that it was going to be a very different film, and Snyder never explicitly said it was different, but he kind of like encouraged that talk. And then I would say somewhere around January, he released that statement, and he was like, "Oh, remember, this is still the Justice League. It's going to be similar. It's just going to be different." So, he said, "Don't get your hopes up that it's going to be totally different from the Whedon cut." So so we're also very confusing messaging, and also too, I honestly think Whedon was kind of trying to do a soft reboot of the DCEU, because kind of, with the exception of Aquaman, I guess he kind of changed a lot of the characters' personalities and their motivations. Particularly Wonder Woman. It seems 1984 completely contradicted this. Like, she's still like hung up on Steve Trevor's death. Like, she mentions it like 4 times in theatrical cut. And then 1984, it's like, oh, she's kind of gotten it over it at this point. And then now with this new cut, I think she only mentions Trevor once. So I don't know. Maybe he was trying to do like a softer reboot. So if they did a sequel to his, it would be more akin to what he was picturing when the movie got made.
yeah, and it's interesting what things actually made their way back into the film. Like a lot of the stuff that's in this version of the film feels like overt sequel setups more than anything else, which makes me think that the part of the logic for this film was kind of like a job interview with Warner Brothers and being like, "Hey, if this goes really well, let's make Justice League 2. Let's get the franchise going again," which I guess makes some amount of sense considering the amount of fan demand for this has been enormous. But I don't know, like how many like false start teases were there for like sequels? At least like 3.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say 3, because you've got the Batman Teen Titans villain. This drives me nuts. You've got the Batman versus Deathstroke tease. You've got the Nightmare Universe tease. You really have a Mira film tease in it. Played by Amber Heard. So maybe you did, but those were definitely the 3 that I saw. Was all 3 of these were the biggest into my peripheral as I was watching the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, and obviously there's also a lot of setup for Martian Manhunter, which doesn't go anywhere in the film, which is weird. I guess the whole implicit attempt there is that he's supposed to be the one of the instigators of the next film, if that ever happens, but I don't know if that's going to happen, so...
Well, and also, too, like, one of the big complaints about the Whedon cut is in the scene where Martha talks to Lois, Martha Kent and Lois Lane, obviously. In the Whedon cut, Martha kind of like does like an accidental double entendre and catches herself, and people are like, "Oh, it ruined the moment between a mom and her future daughter-in-law." But then and we're getting into spoiler territory here, but in that same scene, they took out the joke, which I think was the right move, but they inserted where it wasn't actually Martha, it was the Martian Manhunter. So in my opinion, it still took out the what could have been like a really good tender scene between a mother and a potential daughter-in-law, and by making it with Martian Manhunter, it felt really like they both Whedon and Snyder made the same mistake, just in different ways with this scene. It could, like I said, it could have been a very emotionally impactful part of the movie, but it really wasn't. It felt more like you got tricked in both cuts, in my opinion.
So I remember that particular scene. That was like the Martha Kent Lois Lane scene was one of the ones I actually remembered from the first the theatrical cut that I actually remember liking, just because it felt like one of the few tender scenes where people were actually sitting down and talking about how their feelings about what's happening. And it doesn't in both cuts of the film, there is a severe bereft of characters talking about what they think about what's happening and reacting to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Justice League just perfectly gets along, basically from the word go, and then just sails into the end game without any bickering or drama. And I could see that would have been one of the things that Joss Whedon could have brought to the film if he'd been allowed to have more time to rebuild it into something. But it's clear that he just couldn't do that, and that's something that it bothers me in both cuts.
And honestly, I feel like with the Whedon version of the film, people think it's like what's a good example? The Island of Dr. Mordru, right, where they fired the original director and then brought in this one's fresh on my mind because I just did an interview with Lou Aguilar about it. They fired the original director and then brought in they brought in Frankenheimer. I can't remember his first name.
John Frankenheimer.
John Frankenheimer to oversee it, and he made the film his own. And of course, he had to because the original director burned and shredded all of his production notes and all the scripts. So he had no choice. He had to make it his own. Of course, the final product, like Justice League, the theatrical version, it didn't come out that well. So the difference was the original director didn't get to finish the film. Snyder actually got to finish it, and Whedon was brought on during post, and he reshot some sequences. But this was under a heavy studio lens. Frankenheimer, when he went on the Island of Dr. Mordru, he just basically said, "Fine, I'm just going to oversee this and make it commercially viable." And New Line Cinema, I believe, was the production company. They were like, "Okay, just help us get our money back. That's all we care. We've spent so much money into this, and it's been blown through, and we have cash problems, etc." And I really, with Justice League, Whedon wasn't really given the freedom like he was in Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron. In fact, with Avengers, Marvel only gave him 4 criteria, I believe. They said, as long as you meet these 4 criterias, you can do whatever you want. And I can't remember what they all were, but I know one was Loki had to be the villain, and so on. And so he met all those criterias, and he made, in my opinion, one of the best comic book films ever. That Whedon's kind of a known nerd. But I feel like maybe if he had been given a little bit more freedom, the movie would have been better. And Snyder-Cut, we don't know, it wasn't made. But I think that worked against him, was having the studio magnifying glass, and you've already got this final product, allegedly, that is made. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that was just a thought that I had.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if this actually was what Snyder was going for when he set out to shoot it back in 2016. Because I remember the week after Batman vs. Superman came out, they were supposed to start shooting on Justice League. And the studio flipped the heck out when that movie got as negative a reaction as it did. Because they were like, oh my gosh, we thought we had a hit. This movie is underperforming, and everyone hates it. So, and we can't just shoot the direct sequel exactly like this. It's gonna mess with our bottom line. So I think at some point they sent production notes to Snyder to make it like, oh, add some levity, add some comedy, cut back on stuff. And it's clear that you can see from beginning of 2016 to the end of 2017, the studio was just progressively clenching down on the production and just making it less and less his film, to the point where we got the theatrical cut, which felt just completely empty. Like, I know. Did you end up reading my the piece I wrote on Zack Snyder's depiction of Superman?
Yes, yeah. It came out a couple of days ago, right?
Yeah, that was yesterday.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel like it came out earlier. So then, no, I didn't. I apologize. I thought I had, but I might have been thinking of a different piece you wrote.
Okay. Well, I wrote yesterday about. Well, I wrote it last week, but it was about how Zack Snyder writes his characters. I don't want to repeat everything I wrote there, but I always thought that the interesting thing about Snyder was the fact that he always has these pretensions to have greater ideas in his superhero films, but he just never really knows how to do it. And one of the things I was always disappointed about by the Justice League theatrical cut was there's no ambition in that film whatsoever. Like, all of the ideas that he clearly wanted to add into the film were just completely cut. So it's just a bare bones 2.5 hour comedy, and it just felt and for that reason I always thought that was the least interesting of the three. So I know you are the more serious critic of Snyder. So what do you think of the two of them? Which do you prefer?
Are you talking about Man of Steel or Batman versus Superman?
Justice League.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is so tough because I felt like in the Whedon cut, because I'm a Batman fan. I'm a hardcore Batman fan. I was actually a Batman fan before I was a comic book fan, just to put it in perspective. So I always felt like Snyder didn't grasp Batman. I felt like he read The Killing Joke and ran work, but didn't actually read Miller's work. And so going into it, seeing the trailer, I'm expecting it to be, the brutal Batman who's not afraid to like maim and severely injure bad guys. But I go to this and he's got like a legit mounted machine gun on the Batmobile and Batman vs Superman. But in the Justice League in the Whedon cut, I felt like Whedon understood Batman a little bit better, and but he still had to play off of the BVS thing. So we have this angsty Batman who feels bad about what happened and all this. But I do felt like he understood the character a little bit better. But then staying with Snyder, I would have to say, if I was to look at it unbiasedly, I do think the Snyder cut is better. And just because Snyder is better with aesthetic, comes off very cinematic, very good cinematography. The CGI was way better, and I felt like there was more of a point that he was trying to make. But kind of like what you said, I don't think the point was. It's kind of like the J.J. Abrams mystery box. Like Zack Snyder always has like some point he wants to make, but he never quite makes that point. And I can also, he's really good at the beginning and the middle of his novels, but he's really bad at ending them. And so if I was to look at it unbiasedly, it is a better film because I think seeing the original vision of it, as opposed to someone coming in afterwards and trying to like you were saying, Frankenstein it together, I think that seeing it in its entirety, literally in its entirety, I think that gave it more positives as a movie.
I mean, if I had to etch together what I think the film is trying to be about, I mean, Batman says it itself. I think it's a movie about trying to walk in faith and being willing to do the right thing, even though you don't necessarily have the logic or understanding as to why you're doing the thing. And I think I just noticed that being one of a constant recurring thing, like undertone, especially towards the back half of the film when Superman's back. Just the idea of, well, we don't know it'll work, but I believe it'll work. And eventually that ends up paying off. I mean, the fact that Batman was willing to take the risk and bring Superman back, even knowing that this could backfire horribly, and implicitly that's what they're setting up with the third nightmare sequence, is that it's going to eventually go bad. But I think that just if anything, this is a story about just being willing to trust doing the right thing, knowing that you're doing the right thing. But I don't think it necessarily lives it out otherwise, just because there's so much else going on in the movie, and all that I'm not sure all the character arcs necessarily fit together in a cohesive way. Like, all these characters, like,
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
All these characters feel so awkward together, and a lot of every single one of them like alludes to a greater character arc that's supposed to be happening inside and outside the film. Like, you get like teases towards things that happen in Aquaman. You get teases to the things that happened in Wonder Woman. but it's not complete as a story. It's just characters like being pushed one little edge on their story by the events of the film, but I don't necessarily understand why most of these what is the common thread that makes most of these characters realize, "Oh, I need to go one step farther on my character journey." I don't necessarily know how they get it out of the story.
I would agree with that too, because like I felt like the scene where Barry saves Iris, so the girl in the car and the hot dog stand, and she almost gets hit by a semi, or she does, but he saves her. I really felt like, what was the point of that scene? Because like you were saying, it felt like a thread of a bigger story, but it doesn't really go anywhere. We got everything we needed from Barry through his visit with his father. And so I really felt like it, as well shot as that scene was, I didn't really know what it had to do with the movie. I felt like these more important scenes were constantly being interrupted by, I call them, here's what this character is doing sequences. Like that was happening constantly in this movie. It was I wouldn't say it was jarring, but you would kind of go, I don't care about Barry saving Iris right now. I want to see what's happening with Batman and Wonder Woman right now, and then, or it would be reversed. I don't care what's happening with Batman and Wonder Woman. I want to see what's happening with Barry. There were these constant, which is why movies go through cuts, right? They film, I think something like, they said Blade Runner, they actually filmed like 8 hours worth of footage for it, and they cut it down to 2.5 hours or however long it was. Sometimes you have to do that with a movie, and I think this movie would have been served better if they had just focused on the main plot and not so many of these threads.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just speaks to Snyder's kind of slapdash approach to stories. I mean, I know you don't particularly like him, but he seems to know.
I'm very vocal about that, in case you're wondering.
I think he does good when he's interpreting other people's work. Like, I don't think anyone would disagree that 300 is a great movie, but...
Oh yeah, that's the one movie of his that I like. I love 300.
But he's also working with someone else's material, and it's not necessarily material I think he's approaching from the same ideological angle, because I mean, everyone... I guess, we've talked about his predilection with the Fountainhead, right? That he wanted to do.
He dropped the Fountainhead.
Yeah, he wanted to do an adaptation of the Fountainhead, but then I think he found out that it actually had political implications outside of his personal reason for liking the book. So I'm like, that should kind of tell you something. I think he's attracted to strong characters, but I don't think he fully he comprehends the context for those things, because 300 has a very specific cultural context as a book. It's essentially war on terror propaganda. For in all intents and purposes, that's what Frank Miller did. He did that, he did Holy Terror, and he basically wanted to make like the modern equivalent of like old World War II propaganda cartoons in comic books. And I don't think that's what Zack wanted to do. I think he just wanted to shoot really homoerotic action sequences. And... which, that's fine. It's a great action movie, and it's probably one of the best just pure action flicks of the last 20 years, but there are political implications to it. One way or the other.
Yeah, I actually saw... I actually saw a video essay on Dawn of the Dead, where I haven't seen that movie in years. I don't remember if I liked it or not. I'm being honest. I need to rewatch it as Army of the Dead prepares to come out. But whenever I was watching this video essay on it, and someone was basically saying the same thing about Dawn of the Dead, is the implications of it is that we're going to go back to sort of this capitalistic consumerist society. And I was like, man, I really need to watch this movie again, because I don't remember that at all. I just remember it being a zombie film. So yeah, I think that a lot of times fans and his detractors, like myself, we tend to overanalyze his films, because the fans overanalyze them because they're fans, and then his harshest critics like myself, we tend to overanalyze, combat what the fans are saying. I remember having this conversation with C.S. Johnson. We were talking about The Watchmen, and she was saying, oh, and I think this represents this philosophy, and this scene has this meaning. And I said, I just don't think it's that deep. Well, and I think that way maybe about all of his films is he kind of puts this vague philosophical, but then they end up not being what they are. Hey, I actually, there's a who it is. My dog. I'm gonna go check real quick.
All right, go back.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just heard it. I'm not expecting. I'll be right back.
All right, no worries. We can entertain ourselves for a minute. So, what are we doing? We do have by the time this is up, we should have a couple of the reviews going for the site. So we got our new review. I just reviewed their Vigil, which I saw in Chicago a couple weeks ago.
So just wave at me when you're done. I said I'm on a call right now, so just wave at me when you're done. Okay.
Welcome back. You can't hear me yet.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. So we were just talking about Snyder's adaptations of other things, and I was going to say, I think Snyder philosophizes like a college student. Like, I suspect he's a fairly well-read person, and he has a lot of big ideas that he wants to express, but I don't think he understands the full context of them. And Watchmen's a really good example of that, because the Watchmen graphic novel is probably what is famously one of the most cynical anti-superhero stories there is. But the movie version just plays it up like it's awesome, which is kind of funny, but it's one of those things where you get the sense that he's in awe of the book, but he doesn't understand why the book is interesting, or at least interesting to other people. So he just...
Alan Moore said the same thing about the movie.
Well, Alan Moore has very deep prejudices against basically anyone trying to adapt Watchmen, and basically puts voodoo curses on anyone who tries. So it's not like that's the first time that's happened.
Yeah, I was telling someone in regards to Alan Moore, what he'll do is he always does this thing where he'll praise his work, like exaggerate how great it is, and then when he's no longer significant, I would be cheering him whenever he bashes the Watchmen film, but I'm kind of like, no, he does this all the time. We shouldn't really.
Well, he's an old guy. He doesn't really. Still does comics, I think, but he's like some kind.
He worships a snake, I think.
He's some sort of like new age spiritualist who thinks he can like end the world by sewing spells into his graphic novels. So I mean, good for you, dude. But I'm not gonna buy your pagan voodoo magic books just because I don't want to. I don't know what this I'm going to like inflict upon myself if I open your book. So.
And it's going back to Snyder, I really think that's his problem with Justice League as well. Is like you're saying, he's in awe of Watchmen, and I really think he's in awe of the idea of the Justice League, right? These superheroes, some with powers, some without, coming together and working together, but you can kind of tell that then he removes everything that's unique about the superheroes. So Batman's code of honor, Superman as a beacon of hope, Wonder Woman's compassion and her love to protect and her love of the innocent. And so you end up with, he could have just made Justice League a sequel to Watchmen, and you wouldn't have known the difference, honestly. That, you know, now I've only read Watchmen once, and I've only seen the movie twice. I think I saw the theatrical cut, and then the, what is it called, the final cut, where they have the comic strips in it.
Yeah.
I've only seen those two, so I could be maybe exaggerating a little bit by accident, but I really feel that like he removes what is unique from those characters because he doesn't understand them. And you know, a lot of people bash Jeff Johns, and I don't know what his behavior was behind the scene at DC Films. You know, all we have is accusations, but I honestly feel that, you know, when people were saying, oh, the new 52 influence, that's because of Jeff Johns. And I'm like, well, of course, Jeff Johns helped create the new 52. Of course, he's going to want a hand in developing. So, and I think Snyder went along with it because, you know, it does have new 52 vibes. You know, Darkseid is the first big baddie her, and Steppenwolf has a bigger role in it, like he does on New 52 Earth 2. So I can kind of see those threads where he doesn't really know the character's origins. And I'm not saying Star the Conqueror would have been a better villain for the Justice League film. I'm just saying I really feel like Zack Snyder doesn't understand the characters that he's trying to represent on film, and that's a big negative for me. And his fans are going to love it no matter what, and I really think his fans will enjoy it. I think it's exactly what they were expecting and hoping for.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't get his hands on Doomsday Clock anytime soon, or he might have to deal with a Zack Snyder Justice League Watchmen crossover. But yeah,
I could even direct that. Like,
it probably would be Snyder because he has experience with both now.
That's true.
I mean, I definitely think Snyder's is his influence in comics. It feels like he just went to Barnes and Noble and bought all the trade paperbacks in stock and just kind of brushed up, which is why like they only seem to reference recent stories like Flashpoint and
just Googled them.
I think he's read the books, but I don't think he's like put the time in to actually go find paperbacks of all the old stuff.
That could be true. I mean, the reason I say he hasn't even read them is, you know, when he got confronted to that fan about his portrayal. This is why I'm okay with Tim Burton's films. Is when Tim Burton was confronted by Kevin Smith about how he portrayed Batman, Tim Burton just said, "I've never read the comics. This is just my interpretation of the character." Okay, I can get behind a director saying that. What Zack Snyder does is when he's confronted with his portrayal of Batman, he throws a hissy fit, throws in Alan Moore, and, you know, says, "You're superhero. You live in this dream world where your heroes are still innocent." And I'm like, no, the reason I like Batman is because I know he's not innocent. He lost his innocence when his parents were killed, but he strives to protect innocence now. And so that's why, you know, some of his own statements have made me think, okay, he read The Killing Joke, and then maybe he Googled Frank Miller, and that's how we got where we are. Because to me, it stands like not interpreting a part of the character. With Nolan, whenever he was asked about his influence, he cited very specific titles. He didn't just throw in names. So he said, "Oh yeah, The Long Halloween heavily influenced The Dark Knight. Batman Year One heavily influenced Batman No Man's Land heavily influenced The Dark Knight Rises." And we just see a lack of specificity with Snyder's works. It just seems like a conglomerate of stuff that he researched.
Sure. My Zoom call's about to give out in about 2.5 minutes, so do you want to do final thoughts and then plug your stuff real quick, or?
Yeah, sure. My final thoughts is it's going to be the movie that the fans want it to be. They're going to love it no matter what, and I feel like they're just going to celebrate it. Let them. They earned it. Congratulations. You got the Snyder Cut made. I fully respect Zack Snyder for this, but in the end, it's still just kind of a typical Zack Snyder film. lots of style, no substance.
Yeah, more or less the same thoughts to me, although I would say it was 4 hours long. I didn't feel like cutting myself watching it, so that's worth something. But yeah, do you want to plug your stuff real quick?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at Real Jacob Airey. That's my Twitter handle. And you can go to my website for more information about me at studiojake.com, where I also have links to my YouTube channel, which is also called Studio Jake. I'm also on Rumble, Studio Jake there as well. Also have a new fantasy novel out, The Seven Royals Breaking the Stars. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and if you want a digital version, you can get that at booklocker.com. Check it out. You're going to love it. It's a celebration of all things fantasy and fairy tales.
Nice. I hopefully next time we talk we'll have more than 40 minutes, because now Zoom's finally starting to crack down on me. But yeah, have a good day.
Okay. You too. Talk to you later, Tyler.
See ya. The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Cowley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.